in a police rescue, we get what we call rescues or recoveries. Rescues are when people are trapped in a situation. Recoveries are, sadly, when they've lost their life. And it's a body recovery that they call us in to do. We're at the base there one day, the alarms went off, we went to our vehicles. Dispatch said the Gap in Sydney, which is a cliff face at Southhead, sadly, where people end their lives. And they said there's a body recovery at the Gap. What they call a witnessed jump. Gentleman got out of a taxi and jumped over the cliffs in front of a lot of tourists who were photographing that area at the time. So we made our way out there and we arrived, and there's lots of police and ambulance officers and fire officers there. We set up our gear. One of the young police officers came over to me and he said, "Mr. Raymond, I think I saw him move." I said, "Good on you, thank you." Never happens. Never happens. And I thought, well, see, when people are not used to heights, they get a bit mesmerised at what's... Then one of the paramedics that I used to work with came running over. He said, "Gaz, he just lifted his arm up and dropped it down." I said, "What?" So we switched from a recovery to an urgent rescue. So we wear white overalls with the climbing helmet, and I put the pre-hospital care kit on, put the harness on, locked onto the rope via a carabiner, and abseiled or slid down the rope over 300 feet to the bottom, and ran across the rocks, knelt beside him to check him out, and as I did, he opened his eyes. And I thought, wow, I've never seen it there before. Never. What actually happened, to explain it, because this sounds awful, but he didn't look where he was jumping. He just got out of the taxi, ran up the rocks, over the fence and jumped straight over, and he whacked a heap of ledges on the way down, which, excuse the pun, broke his fall, you know. But he landed on the bottom with some horrific fractures. And he opened his eyes, and I thought, wow. So I started some urgent medical treatment, and he looked at me. He said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "It's okay, mate, I'm treating you, these injuries." And he said, "You can't, I'm dead. You must be an angel." Hey, Brian, anyone thought you was an angel? Oh, no, your wife, Rod, thinks you are. Yeah, I know. And I was just about to say to him, well, my mother-in-law and my wife think I'm an angel, you know, and he said, "You must be an angel, I'm dead. What are you doing this for?" And I said, "Mate, I'm from police rescue." And he said, "I jumped over the cliff, I must be dead." I said, "Well, you're not." But in my mind, I'm thinking, you will be soon. This is pretty horrific. And so I'm doing and he's ripping away the oxygen, trying to rip treatment out that I was trying to give to him to save his life. His blood pressure was low. He was hypovolemic, that is, his blood volume was right down, and multiple fractures. And I'm doing my best for him. I called for a rescue helicopter because I knew airlifting was the quickest out of there, and he was fading away. His life was going into an ebb. And with that, I'd done all the medical treatment I could. I was waiting for the chopper, and my heart broke for him. Does your heart break for people sometimes? Broken heart doesn't mean broken heart, it means it's open to the Holy Spirit's compassion through. Openness is not brokenness. And you know, I just looked at him and I said, "Mate, I've never seen this before. You're alive, I believe, because God has a special plan for you. A special plan. This is a miracle you've survived this." And with that, I started then to pray into him. Just to pray God's blessing upon him. That God would reveal himself in Jesus by his Holy Spirit to him. What had happened, by the way, this guy was on $1 million a year working for a bank in Sydney. And this is awful, but he met a prostitute, fell in love with her, whatever defined love was for he, but anyway, fell in love with her, left his wife and 2 kids, a little boy and a little girl, set her up in a unit overlooking Sydney Harbour, Opera House, the bridge, filled a bank account up for her, and, you know, life for him was so good. And you know what? He came home one day, the joint was empty, and so was his bank account. Gone. gone, never to be found again. And with that, he was broken. He went home, asked his wife, "Can I come back? I'm sorry, I've messed it up." She said, "How can I trust you again? No way, I can't take you back. Just like that, I can't do it. You've hurt us so much." You know, and off he went. Caught the taxi, went to the gap and jumped over. That's what's brought him to this point, to this situation. And as I prayed with him, the chopper's overhead, and you know the road of downwash is noisy and turbulent. You can't really communicate. And so I just kept laying hands on him. The stretcher, the Stokes litter, the basket came down. We'd already packaged him up for transport, put him in, and I went up in the chopper with him, flew out to Prince Henry Hospital Emergency Centre, and the operating team was waiting for him, left him there. Flew back to the gap, picked up my vehicle and equipment, and off I went. And so I was just shaking my head thinking about this guy. How would someone survive that? Never seen it, and I did 10 years full time and over 200 vertical rescues in that time. Never saw it. Well, it's about 2 years later, and I'm upstairs in the rescue squad with a new recruits class doing some lectures, and one of the guys from the squad came to the door and he said, "Someone downstairs to see you." I said, "Right, 2 minutes, I'll be there." So I rounded off the class, dismissed them, and then I went down, and here's a bloke on a walking frame. And, you know, I sort of thought, I don't know this bloke. And I said, "Oh, come in, sir, you wanted to see me." And he said, "Oh, don't you recognise me?" I said, "No, I don't, I'm sorry. How embarrassing's this?" Because I've done dozens and dozens of rescues after this. I said, "Oh, well, do I know you, sir? Did I have something to do with rescuing you from somewhere?" He said, "You should never forget me." He said, "You're my angel." I said, "Oh, you're the bloke from the Gap?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Look at you." And he was a little tottery, of course. These fractures took a long time and they were still healing. And I said, "Oh, mate, look at this. Come in." Took him into the squad and we brewed up a nice coffee for him and, "Tell me, how you been going?" He said, "I'm going great." I said, "Oh, okay, that's good." And he said, "This is what happened to him." And he told me, he said, "I was in intensive care." He said, "The hospital chaplain came in, read my papers and walked over and said, 'Mate, this is a miracle you survived this. God must have a plan for your life.'" Word of knowledge, bro. And he said, "You've been talking to that rescue cop. He told me that and he prayed with me." And the chaplain said, "Well, don't you think God's trying to get through to you?" You know what? God doesn't desire anyone perishes. God will do everything possible via His Spirit to get us to reach out and grab the rescue line in Jesus, sin forgiven for us. He'll go incredible lengths. And we've heard some of the stories already, haven't we? Incredible lengths. We've got a God who'll go more than out of His way, inverted commas, to save us. And He did at Calvary, by the way. Just pausing there for a minute. Oh, no, I'll tell you about this guy. And next minute, he went, looked around, and out of another room, I didn't know, but the rescue guys had G'd all this up, came this lady, this little boy and this little girl. And they came in, he said, "Gary, I'd like to introduce you to my wife, my little son, my little daughter." I said, "Oh, come in, come in." And after a bit of conversation with her, he nodded at the kids, and the little boy first came up, grabbed my hand and closed her eyes and said, "Dear Lord, thank you that Mr. Raymond saved Daddy's life, so come home and love us again." And the little girl came up and grabbed my hand and she said, the little boy, that's right, he was younger, the little boy said, "Dear God, thank you for police rescue that help men like Daddy." Well, this was a tough unit and we'd never carried hankies, right? We weren't allowed to carry hankies, so we had to wipe our eyes with our overalls, you know. And you know what? I just felt wonderfully moved by the Holy Spirit, and I just closed my eyes and I prayed into everybody's lives that were there. And you know, what happened was, his wife gets taken to church by some people. She didn't visit him in hospital. She thought, I hate him. You know, I never want to see him again. I don't care if he survives. She was born again at this lovely Christian City Church in Sydney. And then she went to the hospital to give him a mouthful and say, you need Jesus. And he said, I got Jesus down the bottom of the gap. You know? And with that, they cuddled and forgave one another.